He was a billionaire who thought he had it all, until he saw his ex on a freezing street corner with two little girls, wearing the necklace he gave her the day she disappeared. What followed was a shocking journey of betrayal, fatherhood, and redemption that will leave you breathless. Can love survive 10 years of silence? Stay until the end to find out. Where are you watching from? Let us know below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. It was supposed to be just another cold, gray Tuesday in Manhattan. I was seated in the back of my black SUV, fingers tapping mindlessly against the leather armrest, watching rain slide down the window like the city was slowly melting. A thunderous board meeting had just ended. Something about a billion-dollar merger that was, frankly, going to make us all obscenely richer. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from investors. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't in the mood for champagne smiles or synthetic applause. My driver, Gerald, glanced at me through the rearview mirror but said nothing. He knew better than to interrupt silence that heavy. I closed my eyes, trying to erase the voices in my head. Numbers, projections, Nathan's smug grin after he pitched his asset expansion strategy. God, I needed 5 minutes of nothing. That's when I saw her. It happened in the blur of a red light at 86th and Lexington. Through a film of water on the glass and the fog of my own indifference, something, a figure, caught my eye. A woman on the sidewalk, drenched, her coat too thin for the biting rain. She was holding a cardboard sign against her chest. Beside her stood two little girls in oversized ponchos, huddled beneath a useless plastic sheet like it was armor against the storm. I leaned forward, heart beginning to pound for reasons I couldn't name. Gerald glanced back. "You all right, mister?" "Preston?" I didn't answer. My breath caught in my throat. The woman raised her head slightly, and time warped. "Claire, it couldn't be. 10 years. A whole damn decade since I'd seen that face. Once radiant, now shadowed with fatigue. Once bold and fire-eyed, now tightened with something harder, more enduring. The same woman who'd once told me, 'Your empire can't hold a candle to a real home.' The same woman who disappeared without a trace after our last soul-splitting argument. But it wasn't just seeing her again that hit me like a gut punch. It was the pendant. One of the girls, maybe 5 or 6, wore a tiny jade leaf on a thin silver chain. I remembered that necklace like it was yesterday. I gave it to Claire on her 28th birthday, after our first real fight. She told me then, 'If you ever forget I exist, this will remind you.' I never saw her again after that day. And now here it was, hanging from the neck of a child whose eyes mirrored my own. The light turned green. "Stop the car," I said, my voice almost too low to hear. Gerald hesitated. "Sir?" I said, "Stop the damn car." The brakes squealed as we swerved toward the curb. I flung open the door before the vehicle had even fully stopped. Rain smacked my face like cold slaps, and the chill punched straight through my tailored suit. I didn't care. My eyes locked on the trio, but they were already moving. Claire turned away, clutching both girls close, trying to disappear into the crowd like some phantom. But I chased after her. People rushed past us, umbrellas high, faces turned down like they'd been trained not to see suffering. But I saw her. I had to. I darted across the sidewalk, heart hammering, shoes soaked, searching. I caught a glimpse of that pendant again, bobbing as the child moved beneath the poncho. There they were, a block ahead. Claire was walking fast, determined, like she'd done this 1,000 times, like the city had taught her to survive invisibly. "Claire!" I shouted, the name ripped from somewhere deep in my chest. She froze. The girls clung tighter to her sides. She turned slowly, and our eyes met across 10 years of silence. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. Rain fell between us like static on an old radio. "Michael," she whispered, barely audible over the storm, but I heard her. I heard everything in that one word: pain, disbelief, fatigue, the ghost of something we once were. I took a step toward her, unsure whether to embrace her or drop to my knees. What are you doing here?" I asked, realizing how stupid the question sounded the second it left my mouth. "I could ask you the same," she replied, not angry, just tired. Her voice didn't cut, it ached. The girls stared at me, wide-eyed. One of them, Lily, I would learn later, moved behind Claire's leg, peeking out. The other, Emma, studied me like a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. Claire looked down at them, then back at me. "We don't have time for this, Michael. Wait, just a minute, please." She hesitated. The girls were shivering now. The wind cut through the ponchos like paper. I saw the way Claire's hand trembled as she adjusted the flimsy plastic over their shoulders. "There's a diner," she said finally, voice low. "2 blocks down, but just for a few minutes. The girls need to eat." I nodded, grateful. "Let me help." "No," she snapped, soft but firm. "Just walk." So I walked behind them. No umbrella, no protection. Just me, a man in a $5,000 suit, tailing the woman he never got over and the 2 little girls who might be... No, not yet. Not now. The city roared around us, indifferent, but my world had stopped. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that I had found them or that I had lost them before I even knew they existed. And I couldn't shake one thought. What if those little girls were mine? The diner was the kind of place that hadn't changed since the 70s, flickering neon signs, a bell over the door that chimed weakly, and vinyl booths cracked at the corners. The windows were fogged from the contrast between the cold outside and the stale heat within. As Claire stepped inside with the girls, the waitress behind the counter gave a nod like she'd seen them before. Not with warmth, just familiarity. I paused at the threshold, soaked to the bone, my breath clouding in the air behind me. For a second, I wasn't sure I belonged there. Not in that moment. Not in their world. But then Emma, the younger-looking twin, turned back slightly, her eyes meeting mine with something unreadable. Not fear, not exactly welcome. But she didn't look away. That was enough. I followed them in. Claire led the girls to a booth in the far corner. She sat on one side with them tucked against her, the way a mother bear might shield her cubs. I slid into the seat across from them, the vinyl squeaking under me. No one said anything for a while. The girls reached for the crayons the waitress had brought without being asked, already scribbling on the backs of laminated placemats. Claire peeled off their wet ponchos with methodical care, revealing sweaters so thin I could see the frayed cuffs. My throat tightened. I looked at them. Lily with her careful posture, sitting upright, shoulders stiff, eyes darting from face to face like she was trying to read the room. Emma, in contrast, leaned against her sister, drawing a crooked cat with a grin that reached from ear to ear. She hummed as she drew, quietly, like the world outside didn't exist. "They're beautiful," I said softly, unable to keep it inside any longer. Claire's eyes flicked up to mine, unreadable. "Lily and Emma," she said after a moment. "They're 6. 6. I did the math. 6. Which meant she had gotten pregnant not long after we split, or maybe before. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the sting behind my eyes. The waitress came by to take our order. Claire ordered grilled cheese and fries for the girls, 2 glasses of milk. "Just coffee," she added for herself. "I'll have a burger," I said, though I already knew I wouldn't touch it. My appetite had been drowned somewhere between the Upper East Side and this booth. The girls kept drawing. Emma started whispering something to Lily, who shook her head. Then Emma looked at me boldly and asked, "Are you rich?" Claire flinched. I blinked, then gave a small, honest smile. "Yeah, I guess I am." Emma tilted her head. "Does that mean you have toys?" Lily rolled her eyes, as if embarrassed by her sister's bluntness. "Not yet," I said, "but I think I'll need to get some." Claire shot me a look, a warning, protective, sharp. "This isn't charity," she said under her breath. "I didn't come here for that." "I know," I replied gently, "and I didn't follow you to offer it. I just saw the necklace, and I needed to know." Her fingers curled around her coffee cup, knuckles pale from pressure. "You want to know if they're yours," she said flatly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "I reached out," she said, 3 times. After I left, her voice was even, but her eyes shimmered. "I sent emails, called, your assistant, Margaret, was it? She told me you were too busy for personal matters." I felt my entire chest seize. I remembered Margaret, efficient to a fault, ruthless about my calendar. And I remembered giving her that instruction once. Nothing personal. Ever. I had no idea what that one sentence had cost me. Claire's voice stayed steady. After that, I stopped trying. I stared down at the table, my hands clenched so tight I couldn't feel my fingertips. "They don't talk to strangers," she added after a pause. "Especially men." I looked up to find Lily watching me, her drawing forgotten. Her eyes were sharp, older than 6 should ever be. She didn't blink when I met her gaze. "I'm not here to scare anyone," I said, my voice low. "I'm here because I saw you, Claire, and I couldn't walk away." She didn't respond right away. just stared into her coffee like it held a different kind of truth. The food arrived. The girls dug in with a hunger that broke something inside me. They didn't talk, didn't laugh. They ate like they didn't know when the next meal would come. I'd sat across from billionaires with appetites like sharks, but I'd never seen hunger like this. Real, silent, daily. You missed everything, Claire said quietly. Birthdays, first words, fevers, nightmares. I closed my eyes for a beat, my throat tight. I didn't know, I whispered. But I did, she snapped, and I did it alone. Emma looked up, ketchup on her cheek. Do you have a dog? I smiled, grateful for the shift. Not yet. You should get one, she said seriously. Dogs always stay. Lily narrowed her eyes. You look sad, she said. I blinked. Are you sad because of us? She added. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm sad because I didn't get to know you sooner. The girls didn't say anything more, just went back to eating. Claire looked at me, then looked away. Her shoulders dropped an inch. When the check came, I reached into my wallet. Claire raised a hand sharply. I mean it, Michael. This isn't charity. I know, I said, pulling my hand back. It's not that. I'd like to see you again. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, You're not going to fix this with gifts or one dinner. I know that too. She glanced at the girls. They were already back to coloring, their bellies full, their eyes brighter than they were when I first saw them on the street. Claire reached into her coat, pulled out a worn napkin, and wrote down a name of a park. Greenstone Park. There's a bench by the fountain. We go there sometimes. You can meet us. I nodded. Tomorrow? She shrugged. If we're there, we're there. That was it. No promises, no forgiveness, just a sliver of a door opening in a world I had once slammed shut. As they left the diner, I sat there alone, watching the rain streak down the window, wondering how many more moments I had missed, and how many I was willing to lose. I didn't know if I could be their father, but I knew I wanted to try. The night after I saw Claire and the girls at the diner, I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the DNA test kit like it was some kind of confession box. The packaging was sleek and impersonal, promising fast, private results in bold font like it was selling peace of mind. But there was nothing peaceful about what I was feeling. I turned the box over in my hands again and again. What was I really trying to prove? Claire hadn't begged me for help. She hadn't asked for money, hadn't even invited me into their lives. She'd told me the truth, or at least her truth, and given me a chance to walk away. But I couldn't. Not after seeing the way Lily studied me like a mystery she didn't trust, or how Emma spoke with the kind of unfiltered hope that only came from a child who hadn't been broken by the world yet. I needed to know. Not because I doubted Claire, but because I didn't trust myself. Because every time I felt something stirring in my chest, pride, warmth, something like love, another voice whispered, What if you're wrong? What if this is just guilt talking? The next morning, I mailed the swab. Then I texted Claire, Are you free this afternoon? Greenstone Park? Just to sit and talk. Her reply came an hour later. Short, no emojis, no soft edges. 2 p.m. Near the fountain, we won't wait long. At 1:45, I was already pacing the perimeter of the park. I wasn't in a suit this time. No power tie, no designer trench coat, just jeans, a sweater, and nerves twisted so tight they buzzed under my skin. Then I saw them. Claire, walking slowly, hands in her coat pockets. Lily and Emma skipping a few feet ahead, already giggling, already glowing in a way I hadn't seen in the diner. It hit me like a wave. How natural they looked together. The rhythm of a real family. One I had missed. I stood when they approached. Emma waved. Lily didn't. Claire gave me a slight nod. You're early. I wanted to be sure I didn't miss you. The girls ran toward the pond, chasing ducks and kicking up leaves. Claire and I sat on a worn bench overlooking the water. The silence stretched long between us, but not uncomfortable. She likes the trees, Claire said, nodding toward Lily. She says they make the sky feel like it's breathing. I smiled. She's poetic. She's sharp, too sharp for 6. She reminds me of you, I said before I could stop myself. Claire didn't reply, but her eyes softened for a moment. Then she looked down at my hands. You ordered the test, didn't you? I nodded. I had to. Why? The question was quiet, but it landed like a hammer. I turned toward her, met her eyes. Because I don't want to doubt, I said. Not them, not you, not myself. If I'm going to commit to this, to them, I need to be certain. Claire looked away. You're still the same man, Michael, the one who can't love unless he has it signed, sealed, notarized. No, I said quickly. That's not fair. Isn't it? I exhaled slowly, trying to find the words. This isn't about needing proof. It's about needing permission. I've spent years making decisions with data, with control, but nothing in my life ever made me feel this raw. She didn't speak. I'm trying, Claire, I added. I'm trying to get it right this time. Just then, Lily wandered back toward us. She stopped in front of me, her arms crossed like a tiny judge. You're here again? She said. I am. She tilted her head. Why? Because I want to be. Emma appeared next, handing me a leaf shaped like a heart. It's from the nice tree, she said. You can keep it. I looked at Claire. She was watching the girls with that familiar guardedness, but something in her posture had shifted. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was just holding on. You're good with them, she said under her breath. I looked down at the leaf in my hand. I don't know what I'm doing. None of us do, she whispered. We just show up and try not to screw it all up. We sat like that for a while, just watching the girls throw breadcrumbs to the ducks, Emma narrating their every move, Lily trying not to smile but failing. I wanted to freeze the moment, frame it. Eventually Claire stood. We should go. Dinner prep. Can I walk you to the corner? She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but no expectations. We walked slowly, the girls holding hands between us. At the corner, Lily tugged Claire's sleeve. Can he come again? Claire looked down at her, then at me. Maybe, she said, if he wants to. I do, I said without hesitation. Lily gave a tiny nod, then walked ahead with Emma, who was still humming the duck song she made up on the spot. Claire lingered beside me for just a second longer. I'm not looking for a savior, Michael. I'm not trying to be one. Then don't run when it gets hard. I won't, I said. She gave me a look that said we'll see, and then turned to follow the girls. I stood on the sidewalk long after they disappeared from view, the heart-shaped leaf still in my hand, a quiet promise pressed between my fingers. That night, I didn't answer any emails. I just sat in the dark, watching the wind shake the city skyline, wondering how long it would take for a stranger to become a father, and knowing in my gut, the only way forward was to keep showing up. 2 days after the visit to the park, just as I was beginning to imagine what life might look like if I really became a father, the rug was ripped from under me. I was sitting in my office, sunlight pouring through the tall windows of the penthouse floor of Preston and Reed Capital, when Nathan barged in without knocking. That alone was enough to put me on edge. Nathan Reed didn't barge. He glided, calculated, controlled. He tossed a folder onto my desk. You might want to take a look at that before it hits the press. I frowned, flipping open the folder. The first page was a court document, stamped and signed. My eyes narrowed as I read the heading. Petition for sole custody and financial support. Claire Monroe v. Michael Preston. What the hell is this? I said, the words barely making it past my tightening throat. Exactly what it looks like, Nathan said. She filed it 2 days ago. Our legal team picked it up during the routine media risk sweep. That's impossible, I snapped. We had coffee in a park the day before yesterday. The girls gave me breadcrumbs to feed ducks, for Christ's sake. Nathan gave me that look, the one he used during high-stakes negotiations when he smelled blood. You're a billionaire, Mike, a visible one. There's always someone willing to cash in on a second chance. I shook my head, standing up, the papers trembling in my grip. Claire wouldn't do this behind my back. She didn't even want me to pay for grilled cheese. People change, Nathan said coldly, especially when lawyers get involved. I didn't answer him. I grabbed the folder and left the office without another word. On the drive over to Claire's building, the adrenaline refused to settle. My hands were locked in fists around the court documents. I kept reading and rereading the lines, like if I stared hard enough, the truth would rewrite itself. But the signature at the bottom, Claire's name, neatly penned, mocked me every time. She met me at the door, eyebrows furrowed. She hadn't expected me. Is something wrong? She asked immediately, eyes flicking toward the hallway behind me, as if expecting to see one of the girls hurt. I didn't answer. I just held the papers up in front of her. Her face paled. What is this? She whispered, taking the folder, flipping through it. You tell me, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Because according to this, you want full custody. You want to bleed me for support. You want me erased." She blinked, stunned, then turned back to the paperwork. Her eyes scanned it fast and hard, the way a mother looks when she suspects someone's messing with her family. "I didn't sign this," she said. "This isn't even my current address. This," she pointed to the line above her forged signature, "this apartment was 2 leases ago." I stepped back. The anger was still buzzing beneath my skin, but confusion was taking its place. "You're telling me this is fake?" "I'm telling you I didn't file anything," she said, her voice rising now. "And that isn't my signature. That's not how I write the M in Monroe." I looked at her for a long moment, heart pounding. I'd known her long enough to recognize the shift in her tone, the edge of panic beneath the steel. Claire wasn't a good liar, never had been. "Then someone forged it," I said. Her face hardened. "Who?" I already knew. I looked away, jaw clenched. "Nathan?" Her eyebrows shot up. "Your partner?" "He's been warning me since the day I saw you," I muttered, "telling me not to get involved, that this could damage the firm, that it's bad optics." Claire's eyes flared. "You think he did this to protect you?" I nodded grimly. "To control the narrative, to push me out before I even knew what was happening." Her face darkened with a fury I hadn't seen since we were younger, back when she once threw a wine glass at my office wall because I canceled our anniversary for a Tokyo conference call. "And you believed it," she said quietly, more hurt than angry. "I didn't want to," I said. But for a moment, I didn't know what to believe. Her lips pressed into a hard line, and the pain in her eyes cut deeper than anything she could have said. "So that's how little you think of me." "I was scared," I said, stepping closer. "Not of you, not even of the money. I was scared of losing them before I had a chance to even begin. I was scared all of this was a setup, and that I'd be left standing in court with nothing but a broken heart and a headline." Claire crossed her arms over her chest, her voice tight. "You still think I'm capable of that? After all I've done to keep them safe without asking for a damn thing from you?" "No," I said, and I meant it. "I don't. Not anymore." We stood in silence. The air between us, already cracked, threatened to shatter completely. She let out a shaky breath. "So what now, Michael? You gonna go back to your empire? Pretend this was a fluke of nostalgia?" I didn't hesitate. "No, I'm not walking away." "You'd give up your company for this?" she asked, almost disbelieving. "If it comes to that, yes," I said. "I'd rather be broke and their father than rich and a stranger." Claire stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then, finally, she opened the door a little wider. "You'd better prove it," she said. "Because if I find out your partner tried to steal custody of my daughters to manipulate you, I'm not just going to court, I'm going to war." I gave her a bitter smile. "Then let me load the cannons." That night, I returned to my office building, not as a CEO, but as a man ready to start a fire. I called an emergency executive meeting. Nathan sat at the head of the table like he owned it. "I'm suspending Nathan Reed effective immediately," I announced, sliding the forged documents onto the polished boardroom table. Gasps filled the room. Nathan sat up straighter. "You've lost your mind," he said, voice icy. "No," I replied. "I finally found my reason. We don't sacrifice families for profits." "Not anymore." "You're choosing her over your legacy?" he spat. "No," I said. "I'm choosing my daughters over yours." He didn't speak after that. As I left the conference room, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not power, not pride. Clarity. I walked out into the Manhattan night, the city roaring around me, and for the first time since that red light on 86th Street, I knew exactly who I wanted to become. Not a partner, not a mogul. A father, a real one. That night I didn't sleep, not really. I sat at my desk until well past midnight, the skyline of Manhattan pulsing in electric silence beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. My office was dark except for the glow of my laptop screen. The leather chair creaked every time I shifted. And all I could think about were the 3 emails I'd never read. They were there, hidden deep in an old backup drive I'd pulled from storage. It took me hours to locate it, to dust it off, to override the encryption. Margaret, my former assistant, had built firewalls around my life like a fortress. Back then, I thought she was doing me a favor, screening personal messages, ignoring voicemails, flagging only what was urgent. I told her to do it. I told her I needed to focus. "Don't bother me with personal stuff," I had said once. "There's too much at stake." She followed that order to the letter. When I finally found the folder labeled Personal, screened, my heart sank. There were dozens of emails. Some were spam. A few were from old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. But 3 messages were from Claire Monroe. The subject lines were heartbreakingly simple. Email 1, call me when you can. It's important, please. Dated roughly 8 weeks after she left. Email 2, I wouldn't reach out if this wasn't serious. 2 days later. Email 3, I'm pregnant. That one gutted me. No drama, no manipulation, just a truth she tried to tell me. I sat there frozen, my hand resting on the mouse, the screen glowing like it was mocking me. I had been in Tokyo at the time, closing a multinational acquisition. Margaret had likely seen the message and deleted it from my day before I even knew it existed. I could hear her voice in my memory, calm, professional, efficient. I handled it. Nothing critical came through. Except it was critical. It was everything. I leaned back in the chair and covered my face with both hands. My throat ached. The weight of it, the knowledge that Claire had tried, that I had missed my chance not out of malice but sheer arrogant negligence. It hollowed me. I hadn't just missed the birth of my daughters. I had erased the possibility of knowing they even existed. That night I didn't text Claire. I didn't call. I couldn't. What would I even say? Sorry, I was busy being important. Sorry I didn't read the message that would have made me a father sooner. Sorry I built walls so high even you couldn't climb over them. The next morning, I stood in front of Claire's building again, hands in my coat pockets, unsure whether I belonged there. The city was waking up, taxis honking, pigeons flapping, people heading to work with coffees and headphones, and that typical New York urgency. Then I saw them. Claire stepped out of the building holding Lily and Emma's hands. The girls wore bright-colored backpacks, bouncing against their coats as they skipped. Claire didn't see me right away. But the girls did. Emma spotted me first. She grinned wide and unfiltered and waved. Lily looked more cautiously. Then, after a second, offered a tiny nod. Claire finally turned and stopped in her tracks. Her expression was a mix of surprise and caution. She walked toward me slowly. You okay? She asked, instantly glancing at the girls like maybe something had happened. I cleared my throat. I needed to say something. She looked skeptical. Now? Just for a second, please. She hesitated, then glanced down at the girls. Can Mr. Preston walk with us to the gate? She asked gently. Both girls nodded. And so we walked, all 5 of us, down the city sidewalk as the world bustled around us. When we reached the school corner, Claire stopped. The girls ran ahead, squealing about some classroom turtle. I turned to her. I found your emails, I said, voice low. She stiffened. From 10 years ago, I continued. You sent 3. I never saw them. Claire's brows knit. What are you talking about? My assistant, Margaret, she screened everything back then. I told her to. I didn't want distractions. She never told me. I didn't know you were trying to reach me. I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know about the girls. Claire stared at me, stunned into silence. I thought you just didn't care, she whispered. I shook my head, guilt crashing into me like a wave. I cared. I just didn't know how to show it. I thought I was building something meaningful. I didn't realize I was locking the most important part of my life out. Claire looked down the street, where the girls were now waving from the school gates. You missed a lot, she said quietly. I nodded, my chest tight. I know, but I'm here now, if you'll let me be. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't walk away either. That silence, charged with something that felt like possibility, was more than I deserved. When the girls disappeared into the school, Claire and I lingered a moment longer. This doesn't fix anything, she said finally. It doesn't undo the years I raised them alone. I know, I said. I'm not asking for a pass. I'm asking for the chance to show up for what's left. Claire looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she gave the smallest nod. Then start showing up, she said. Every day, not just when it's convenient, not just when it feels good. Every day. I took a slow breath. I will. And this time I meant it. Without conditions, without timelines, without a backup plan. Later that afternoon, I sat at the kitchen counter again, staring at the envelope. The DNA test had arrived. The courier had dropped it off with no fanfare, no ceremony. Just a white, sealed envelope that held the answer to a question I no longer needed, but still had to face. My coffee sat untouched beside me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. I exhaled, slow and shaking. They were mine. Lily and Emma were mine. The tears came before I could stop them. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, aching drops that traced down my cheeks and landed on the countertop. For the first time, it was real. Not because a lab said so, but because I knew. I had known the moment Emma gave me that heart-shaped leaf. The moment Lily asked why I looked so sad. They were mine, and I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't announce anything. No press release, no farewell email filled with empty sentiments. No speech in the boardroom about new beginnings or next chapters. That morning, I simply walked into the office earlier than usual, nodded at the receptionist, and slid a sealed envelope across the table to Julia Mendez, the COO, and the only person in the building I trusted without reservation. She looked at me with concern. "Is this what I think it is?" "It's time," I said quietly. "You're ready." "More than ready." Julia blinked, then nodded. She didn't ask for a reason. She didn't need one. Maybe because she already saw the change in me, how my tie had vanished weeks ago, how I stopped carrying 2 phones, how the man who once ruled the boardroom with clinical efficiency had started missing morning meetings for elementary school drop-offs. As I left the office, my heart didn't race. My chest didn't tighten. It felt right. The end of a life I'd chased for years, and the start of one I almost missed entirely. That afternoon, I picked up Lily and Emma from school for the first time by myself. No assistant to schedule it. No driver waiting at the curb. Just me, in a hoodie, jeans, and a cup of lukewarm coffee in my hand. I parked 2 blocks away because the area was jammed, then walked, letting the cold air clear the last remnants of corporate haze from my head. The school bell rang at exactly 3:15. Emma came barreling out first, her backpack bouncing wildly as she yelled, "He's here! He's really here!" She ran straight into me like a torpedo, nearly knocking the wind out of my chest. I caught her and laughed, holding her tight. "Of course I'm here. I said I would be." Lily followed a moment later, more composed but with a quiet smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She didn't say much. She never did, but she reached for my hand without hesitation, and that alone said everything. "Can we get ice cream?" Emma asked, already skipping ahead. "It's 35 degrees, I said. "Hot chocolate then." "Hot chocolate it is." We stopped at the corner cafe. The girls chatted over mugs filled with whipped cream and marshmallows, their cheeks pink from the cold. Emma told me about a spelling test she definitely crushed, while Lily quietly slid a drawing across the table. It was a picture of the 3 of us. Stick figures, sure, but we were all holding hands, and I was in the middle. My throat tightened. That night, after I dropped them off with Claire, I stayed behind for a few minutes. I helped Emma put away her toys, read Lily a short bedtime story while she rested her head on my arm. Claire watched from the hallway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. After the lights were out and the girls were asleep, she met me in the kitchen. She handed me a mug of tea without a word. "Long day?" I asked. "They always are," she said, half smiling, "but easier now." I glanced around. The apartment wasn't big, but it was warm, lived in, filled with life. Crayon drawings on the fridge, a pile of shoes by the door, the faint scent of cinnamon and soap. "I left the firm," I said. Claire turned stunned. "What?" I stepped down. "Julia's taking over. I'll stay on in an advisory role for now, but I'm done running the show." She set her mug down slowly. "Are you serious?" "As serious as 2 6-year-olds asking for hot chocolate in a blizzard." She laughed, a soft, surprised laugh. "You really gave it up?" "No," I said. "I traded it." "For what?" "For this." I looked around. "For dinners I don't miss, for drop-offs I never did before, for Lily's drawings and Emma's jokes, for second chances." Claire studied me. "That's a big change, Michael." "I was already halfway out the door the day I saw you on that corner," I admitted. "I just didn't know it." We stood in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that used to scare me. Now it felt like home. Over the next few weeks, everything changed, and yet, nothing did. There were no headlines, no dramatic reversals of fortune. But my world rearranged itself. The girls began spending weekends at my place. I learned how to braid hair, poorly at first, then marginally better. I packed lunches, I did school pickups, I sat through a full hour of second-grade show and tell where Emma presented a rock she'd named Steve with deep philosophical pride. Lily remained quieter, still a little guarded. But when I sat on the floor and helped her with puzzles, she leaned into my shoulder without a word. Claire let me in slowly. She was careful, cautious. I didn't blame her. I'd vanished once, unknowingly maybe, but it didn't make it hurt any less. So I didn't push. I didn't ask for a title or a timeline. I just kept showing up. We split things naturally. If one of the girls had a doctor's appointment, we both went. If Claire had a late client meeting, I stayed with the girls and made dinner, even if that dinner was sometimes cereal and sliced bananas. The first time Emma called me Dad, I was tying her shoes. She said it casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Dad, can you make sure the bow isn't floppy? I froze, hands halfway through the knot. Claire looked up from the kitchen. Neither of us said a word. But my heart, that old guarded thing, swelled in my chest like a balloon filled with light. After that, everything softened. Emma called me Dad every other sentence. Lily waited a little longer, but one night, when she was half asleep on my couch, she whispered, "Night, Daddy," before I carried her to bed. I didn't cry. Not then. But later, in the quiet of my apartment, with crayon drawings taped crookedly to my walls and glitter on my coffee table, I did. Not because I was sad, but because I had finally stopped being a ghost in my own life. And for the first time, I wasn't running from anything. I was running towards something. Or rather, two small someones with backpacks and chocolate-covered smiles, who were starting to believe that I'd always be there. And now, I believed it too. The envelope was still on my kitchen counter 3 days after I'd read it. I hadn't thrown it out. I hadn't framed it either. It just sat there, slightly wrinkled at the corners, a quiet reminder of what I now knew in blood, not just in heart. Lily and Emma were mine. Not 85%, not a chance. 99.97%. But as much as I thought that confirmation would be the turning point, the moment where everything clicked into place, it wasn't. Because now came the part no test could prepare me for. Telling them. I had practiced 100 different versions in my head, rehearsed in the mirror, whispered into the silence of an empty room. But every time I looked at their faces, full of curiosity and mischief and tenderness, every version I came up with crumbled. Because how do you say to a child, "I've been your father all along," even if I didn't know it? It was Claire who made the first move. "Tell them this weekend," she said quietly, one evening while we cleaned up glitter and glue from the dining table. Emma had made a solar system collage that ended up looking more like a sandwich with moons. "They're ready," she added. I looked at her, my heart stumbling in my chest. "Are you?" She paused. I didn't need a piece of paper to know what I already saw. But yeah, I think I'm ready too. The next morning, I packed sandwiches, snacks, juice boxes, and headed with the girls to Greenstone Park. We played catch. Emma climbed the jungle gym like a squirrel on espresso. Lily found a patch of daisies and made crowns. I wore one for a full 30 minutes without protest. When we sat down beneath a tree near the fountain, I took a breath and looked at them, my daughters. "I want to tell you something," I said, voice steady but low. "Something important." They paused, snacks in hand, eyes wide. "I know you've called me Michael, and that's okay, but the truth is, I'm not just someone who visits or picks you up. I'm your dad." Silence. Lily stared, her mouth slightly open. Emma blinked. "For real?" Lily finally asked. I nodded. "For real. I didn't know at first, not when you were born, but now I do. And I promise I'll never disappear again." Lily looked down at her lap, processing. Emma slowly got up and walked around me in a circle like she was inspecting a statue. Then suddenly, she wrapped her arms around my neck and said, "I knew you were someone." Lily didn't say anything right away. She looked at me, and I could see the wall still holding, but a crack had formed. "Does this mean we live with you now?" she asked, cautious. "Not right away," I said gently. "You'll still live with Mom, but it means I'll be around. A lot more, if that's okay with you." Emma nodded so hard, I worried she'd get whiplash. Lily hesitated, then said, "I don't remember having a dad." I smiled, touched her hand softly. "That's okay. We can start now." That night, after they went home, I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet and cried harder than I had since I was a kid. Not from sadness, from the sheer relief that I hadn't missed everything, that I had a shot at building something with them. Not just because of a test, but because of who we were becoming. But life, as always, had its complications. 2 days later, I received a call from Nathan. He had found out I had officially resigned from daily operations. "We need you in Geneva," he said flatly. "The merger with Lantara is hitting final stages. If you're not there in person, it could fall through." "I'm not flying to Europe for a deal I don't even believe in anymore," I said. "It's not about belief. It's about leadership. My daughters just found out I'm their father. I'm not leaving." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, you built this, Michael. Don't burn it to the ground over playground time and crayon drawings." I hung up without answering, but the problem was, I had built it. My name was stamped on contracts across 3 continents. Walking away wasn't just symbolic. It had ripples. And I felt them when Julia called later that day, her voice tight. "We need clarity. Investors are starting to ask questions. Are you still part of this company or not?" I looked at the calendar. Zoe's school play, the Great Jungle Parade, was Friday night. My flight to Geneva would have to leave Thursday afternoon to make it. And in that moment, standing in the middle of my living room, I felt pulled in 2 directions by hands that didn't know the other existed. I chose the play. I canceled the flight. Sent Julia a short message. "I'll stay on as consultant. I won't be attending any travel negotiations. I'm a father now." I didn't get a reply. Friday night came. The auditorium was packed. Parents clutched bouquets. Cameras flashed. Kids buzzed with nerves and sugar. I took a seat in the front row. Claire sat beside me, her hand brushing mine, not holding it, but close. Emma peeked out from behind the curtain, spotted me, and waved furiously. Lily stood beside her in a leopard costume, giving me a quiet, knowing nod. When Emma stepped onto the stage for her line, she paused, scanned the crowd again, and beamed. "Daddy, I see you!" she yelled before launching into her jungle speech. The audience laughed. I didn't even blink. My heart was too full. After the play, the girls ran up, demanding praise and snacks in equal measure. Claire handed them juice boxes and smirked at me. "You picked the right stage," she said. I smiled. "Best investment I ever made." We walked home slowly, the girls skipping ahead in the glow of street lamps and adrenaline. Claire and I lingered at her door. "You really turned the plane around?" she asked. "I didn't even get to the airport," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "That's something. It's just the beginning." She nodded. "Good, because they're watching now, every move." I nodded too. "Then I'll make every one count." And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about legacy or risk. I was thinking about bedtime stories and packed lunches, school calendars and dance recitals. This wasn't the future I had planned, but it was the one I'd been waiting for my whole life. 6 months passed. Not in a blur, not in chaos, but in something softer. Something I hadn't known I could live in. Rhythm. I used to measure time in mergers and milestones, in quarterly growth and press cycles. Now I measured it in things like pancake flips, forgotten lunchboxes, tangled shoelaces, and stories about playground politics. Somewhere between tying Emma's costume wings for her ballet class and helping Lily build a solar system for her science fair, I had crossed an invisible threshold, from a visitor in their world to someone who belonged. It wasn't perfect. There were mornings when the alarm didn't go off, when someone cried over a mismatched sock or a missing library book. There were tense moments with Claire too, like when we disagreed over screen time limits or the girls' bedtime routines. But it wasn't the kind of tension that made you retreat. It was the kind that meant you were in it. Co-parenting with Claire had become something I hadn't expected. Functional, honest, even occasionally warm. We weren't romantic, at least not yet, but we moved like teammates. We shared pickups and dentist visits. We split weekends and holidays, and most importantly, we talked. Really talked. Not just about logistics, but about the girls, about where we'd been and what we wanted to do better. The girls flourished. Lily, once so guarded, had started writing stories. Her teachers emailed us saying she'd begun reading them aloud in class. Little tales of adventure with a quiet, brave heroine named Ellie, and a wise father with messy hair who always arrived just in time. Emma, bold as ever, had declared herself president of the apartment. She made me sign a handwritten family contract with crayon signatures at the bottom that read, "Daddy promises to make pancakes on Sundays. Mommy promises to always have snacks. Lily promises to share her markers. Emma promises to be awesome." I framed it and hung it above my desk. One Friday evening, we hosted the girls' 7th birthday party at Claire's new duplex. She had finally found a place big enough for both comfort and creativity. A warm space with wood floors, scattered plants, and her signature. Walls full of color and stories. The girls chose a galaxy theme. I went all in. I ordered decorations from 3 different suppliers. I spent 2 nights learning how to inflate moon-shaped balloons and hang glow-in-the-dark stars without them falling. Claire baked a cake shaped like Saturn, and I rented a magician who dressed as a space explorer. The kids screamed with joy. Parents laughed. The sun dipped low, and for a brief, golden hour, the backyard felt like a new planet we'd built just for them. Then Nathan showed up. I didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't in his usual armor, no tailored blazer, no designer watch. He wore a simple sweater, jeans, and held a large, awkwardly wrapped box under one arm. I stood frozen at the back gate. So did Claire, just a few feet behind me. "What is he doing here?" she asked under her breath. Before I could answer, Emma spotted him. "Someone's here." Lily followed her gaze, eyes narrowing. She walked up to me and whispered, "That's your old friend, right?" "Something like that," I said. Nathan walked up, cleared his throat, and offered the gift. "It's a telescope," he said. "Thought your future astronaut might like it." There was something unfamiliar in his tone. Humility? Maybe regret. I took the box, nodded once. "Thanks." The girls didn't shy away. Emma naturally asked, "Do you know any real astronauts?" Nathan chuckled, shook his head. "Not yet." Lily tilted her head and said, "You have weird hair, but you can stay, I guess." And just like that, Nathan was in. He stayed for an hour, longer than I expected. He didn't pitch a single deal or talk about market forecasts. He helped kids tie balloon animals and even joined in on space trivia. Claire kept her distance, but watched him like a hawk. I stayed close to the girls, and the tension I thought might consume the day simply dissolved under layers of cake frosting and glittery smiles. After the party, Claire and I sat on the back steps, plates in hand, the house finally quiet. "Not bad for your first real joint party," she said. "High praise from the party queen," I teased. She looked at me, then out toward the yard where Lily and Emma chased soap bubbles through leftover streamers. "They're happy," she said softly. "They are," I agreed, "and for the first time, I think I am too." She turned to me, surprised. "You? Happy without a boardroom and a billion-dollar deal hanging over your head?" I laughed. "Turns out, bubble wands and bedtime stories aren't a bad trade-off." She didn't smile, but something flickered in her eyes. Something warm. We sat in silence for a while. Then Ava climbed into my lap, resting her head on my shoulder. "Best birthday ever," she mumbled sleepily. Zoe flopped beside us, frosting still smeared on her cheek. I wrapped an arm around them both, my fingers gently smoothing their hair as the stars blinked awake above us. I used to think love came in grand moments. Big gestures, lavish dinners, signed deals. But now I knew better. It came in a sleepy whisper, in a homemade cake shaped like a planet. In 2 little girls who once looked at me with caution and now clung to me like I'd always been there. Later that night, after the girls had gone to sleep, Claire and I stood in the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. No wine, no celebration, just stillness. "You didn't have to come back," she said after a while. I looked at her, really looked. "The old me wouldn't have." She nodded, like she already knew. "But I'm not him anymore," I said. "And whatever comes next, whatever we figure out, I'll keep choosing this. Over and over again." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then finally she reached across the counter and took my hand. Just for a second. And in that second, something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration. It was presence. Real, human, flawed, but rooted. The kind you don't walk away from. Not again. As I left her place that night, the city breathed around me. Bright, alive, full of noise and meaning. And I realized that the life I thought I needed was nothing compared to the one I almost lost. Because in the end, it wasn't about legacy or empire. It was about Lily's quiet strength, Emma's wild joy, Claire's enduring grace. It was about showing up and never leaving again. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you're still here, it means you felt something, and that means everything to us. This story wasn't just about a man rediscovering his role as a father. It was a reminder that no matter how much time we've lost, it's never too late to do the right thing. To show up, to listen, to rebuild. Sometimes the greatest legacy we can leave isn't written in contracts or built in boardrooms, but in the small, quiet moments of love, consistency, and presence. We hope this story touched your heart the way it touched ours. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how stories can connect us across the world. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have many more heartfelt stories like this one coming your way. Hit the bell so you never miss a moment that might just change your day or your life. Thank you again. You are part of our story now.